The city never slept. It only changed its rhythm. In the early morning, before the streets filled with noise and impatience, faint echoes of life stirred rickshaws coughing to life, street vendors setting up wooden carts, and the smell of freshly baked naan drifting through narrow alleys. Amid the swirl of motion and ambition, Amir walked briskly, his leather shoes tapping against the cracked pavement like the ticking of a clock that refused to slow down. He was like every other office worker, clean shirt, tired eyes, phone in hand. He had somewhere to be, something to prove, and no time for distractions. His world existed in schedules, deadlines, and text messages that started before sunrise and rarely ended before midnight. But on this particular morning, something broke the monotony. As Amir turned onto a quieter lane, near a faded brick wall covered in half-torn posters, his foot caught on something soft. He stumbled forward, steadying himself, his eyes darting down in irritation. A small boy sat cross-legged on the ground beside him. Barefoot. Dust-covered. His tiny hands were holding a bunch of wilted flowers, roses, jasmine, marigolds, all tied together with pieces of old thread. His face was smudged with dirt, but his eyes were impossibly alive. "Buy one, sir?" the boy asked, his voice trembling yet full of hope. "For your mother? Or maybe someone you love?" Amir blinked, still catching his breath. The boy couldn't have been older than 8 or 9. His shirt hung loosely off his shoulders, one button missing, and the sleeves were too short for his thin arms. No. I don't need," Amir muttered, stepping aside, brushing imaginary dust from his pants. The boy smiled anyway, the kind of smile that carried no bitterness, just the quiet resilience of someone who had learned to expect rejection. "Okay, sir," he said softly. "Maybe next time." Amir walked away quickly, pretending not to hear the boy's faint sigh behind him. The city swallowed him again. Horns blared, phones rang, people bumped shoulders without apology. Amir moved like a shadow among thousands seen by none, seeing no one. Yet something in that child's voice stayed with him. At his office, he tried to bury himself in work. Numbers, charts, emails, his armor against emotion. But each time he looked at the coffee mug beside his laptop, he thought of those little hands clutching flowers. Each time he glanced at the clock, he remembered the boy's soft voice, "Buy one, sir. For your mother." He hadn't thought about his mother in weeks. Not since her last call. She always told him, "You sound tired, Amir. Don't forget to look up sometimes." He'd laughed it off then. He was too busy climbing the invisible ladder of success. By noon, the image of that dusty street corner had burned itself into his thoughts. He tried to shake it off, telling himself there were thousands of such children, and one man couldn't possibly make a difference. Yet deep inside, something uneasy stirred. That evening, as Amir left the office, the sky had turned a dull orange. The world felt slower now. He walked the same route home, but this time, when he passed the narrow lane, he slowed his pace without meaning to. The boy was still there, sitting in the same spot. But now he looked tired, his head resting against the wall, eyes half closed. The flowers were fewer, their colors fading with the day. Amir hesitated. He could walk on. Pretend he hadn't seen. Pretend that the world outside his bubble didn't exist. But as he watched, an older man walked by, glanced down at the boy, and muttered, "Get a real job," before disappearing into the crowd. The boy didn't react. He just sat there, gently arranging what was left of his flowers, trying to make them look beautiful again. Something inside Amir broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. He checked his wallet. Only large bills. He almost turned back, but the boy looked up just then, eyes meeting his. That same small smile appeared. Not pleading. Not desperate. Just hopeful. Amir opened his mouth to speak but no words came. Instead, he nodded awkwardly and walked away again, the guilt trailing behind him like a shadow. That night, sleep refused to come. The city lights outside his apartment flickered like restless thoughts. Amir turned from side to side, the hum of the ceiling fan whispering memories he didn't want to face. He thought of the boy's smile. The quiet dignity in it. The way his small hands had tried to protect those fading flowers, as if beauty was something worth fighting for even in the dust. For the first time in a long while, Amir felt small. All his meetings, all his deadlines, all his ambitions suddenly they felt hollow. Because what good was success, he wondered, if it made you blind to the world that needed your heart? The next morning, Amir woke early. He didn't check his phone. He didn't rush. He simply got dressed, tucked his wallet into his pocket, and took the same route to work hoping, for reasons he couldn't explain, to see that small boy again. He didn't know it yet, but that simple act of turning back was the beginning of everything that would change both their lives. The next morning arrived quietly, wrapped in a pale mist. The city hadn't fully awakened yet, only the sound of distant footsteps, the clink of teacups, and the occasional bark of a stray dog filled the air. Amir walked slower this time. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was something softer, a tug in his heart that whispered, "Go back." He turned onto the same narrow lane as before, eyes scanning the wall covered in fading posters and chipped paint. And there he was. The boy. He sat in the same spot, his small basket of flowers resting beside him. The morning light caught the dust in the air, turning it golden, like the world itself wanted to make the moment gentle. Amir felt something twist inside his chest. The boy was carefully separating fresh flowers from the wilted ones, humming a faint tune that barely carried over the street noise. His hands were steady, practiced. This was his world, and he was trying to make it beautiful, even if no one noticed. "Good morning," Amir said, his voice uncertain. The boy looked up, startled. Then that same smile bloomed again, brighter than the flowers in his basket. "Sir. You came back." Amir felt a lump in his throat. "You came back." Such simple words. But the way the boy said them, it was as if he'd been waiting, as if a stranger's return meant something. Amir crouched down. "What's your name?" "Zain," the boy replied, his eyes shining. "I sell flowers every morning. My mother makes garlands at home." Amir nodded slowly, unsure what to say. He picked up one of the small flower bundles, its fragrance soft and sweet. "How much for all of them?" Zain blinked in surprise. "All of them?" "Yes," Amir smiled faintly. "All?" The boy hesitated. "Sir, there are many. I can give discount." "No need," Amir interrupted gently. "Keep the change." He handed over a large bill. Zain's eyes widened, staring at the money as if it might vanish. "Are you sure, sir? This is too much." "I'm sure." The boy looked at the flowers in his hands, then at Amir. His lips trembled for a second before curving into a smile that was part gratitude, part disbelief. "Thank you, sir. You're very kind." Amir didn't know what to do with that word kind. It had been a long time since anyone had used it for him. As Amir walked away, the weight he usually carried, the deadlines, the pressure, the noise felt lighter somehow. He didn't look at his phone once on the way to work. For the first time in years, he noticed the morning sky, streaked with pink and orange. In the office, his colleagues noticed something different too. He wasn't snapping at anyone. He even laughed once, a sound that surprised everyone including himself. When evening came, he found himself glancing out the window, wondering if Zain was still on that corner. He didn't understand why, but the boy's face had stayed with him. The way he smiled despite having so little. The way he'd called him sir with such respect, not resentment. It stirred something deep, a memory of his own childhood. Amir had grown up in a small town. His father had passed away early, and his mother had raised him alone, selling handmade clothes to keep him in school. She used to tell him, "Kindness is not a favor, Amir. It's a language the heart never forgets." He hadn't thought about that in years. Not until Zain. The next few days passed in their usual blur: meetings, traffic, noise, but Amir found himself looking forward to the mornings. To that small stop at the corner. Sometimes, Zain wasn't there. Other days, he was, waving with both hands when he saw Amir coming. They started talking, small conversations at first. "Do you go to school, Zain?" Amir asked one morning. The boy shook his head, eyes lowering. "I used to. But my mother got sick last year. I help her now." Amir's chest tightened. "You're helping your family. That's brave." Zain shrugged shyly. "I'll go back one day. Mama says we must never stop dreaming." He smiled again then, and Amir couldn't help but return it. One Friday, when Amir arrived at his usual time, Zain wasn't there. The spot was empty, the wall bare. His basket was gone. A strange worry gripped Amir's heart. He stood there for several minutes, scanning the street, feeling foolish but restless. Finally, an older vendor nearby noticed him. "Looking for the flower boy?" the man asked. "Yes," Amir replied quickly. "The small one, Zain?" The vendor nodded. "He's been sick these 2 days. His mother too. Their house is just down the alley. Small blue door." Amir didn't think twice. He followed the directions, his heart pounding faster than his steps. The alley was narrow and smelled of damp earth. When he found the small blue door, it was half open. Inside, the room was dim, walls stained with time. A woman lay on a thin mattress, coughing softly. Beside her, Zain sat quietly, fanning her with a piece of cardboard. When he saw Amir, his face lit up instantly. "Sir! You came." Amir felt his throat tighten again. He stepped closer, placing a small paper bag on the table. "I brought some food. You need to rest, both of you." Zain's mother struggled to sit up, but Amir gently gestured for her to stay still. She looked at him with tired eyes full of gratitude. "You didn't have to, sir." "I wanted to," Amir replied softly. For a moment, no one spoke. The city noise faded. There was just the quiet rhythm of kindness finding its way through the cracks of a hard world. That evening, as Amir walked back home, his hands were empty but his heart felt full in a way it hadn't for years. He didn't know it yet, but that small visit, that bag of food, that moment of care, would be the spark that lit a much bigger flame. Because sometimes, one act of kindness doesn't end, it begins. Days turned into weeks. The rhythm of life, once dull and mechanical for Amir, began to shift in quiet, almost imperceptible ways. Every morning, before heading to work, he stopped by the corner where Zain sat. What began as a random act of kindness had turned into a gentle ritual. He no longer hurried past. He lingered. Talked. Listened. Sometimes they spoke about flowers, how jasmine meant purity, how marigolds were for celebrations. Other times, Zain told small stories, about the stray cat that followed him home, about his mother's laughter when she felt well enough to cook, about how he wished to go back to school one day and become someone people listened to. Amir didn't always know what to say. But he listened. Really listened. And that was enough. One morning, when he arrived, the boy wasn't there. His small basket rested on the ground, but Zain was nowhere in sight. Amir's stomach sank. The air felt heavier, the street quieter. He asked the nearby vendor again, but this time, the man simply said, "Hospital. His mother is there." Very sick. Without hesitation, Amir took a cab to the local government hospital. The corridors smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion. After a few wrong turns, he found Zain sitting on a wooden bench outside a small ward. His face was pale, his eyes red from crying. When he saw Amir, he wiped his face quickly and tried to smile. "Sir, you came." Amir sat beside him. "Of course I did." The boy looked at the floor. "They said Mama needs medicine. But it costs too much." Amir didn't think twice. He reached for his wallet. "Let me help." Zain shook his head fiercely. "No, sir. You already helped. You buy flowers, you bring food." Amir interrupted gently, "Zain, sometimes helping once isn't enough. Sometimes, when life gives you a chance to be kind, you take it again and again." Tears welled in the boy's eyes. He didn't argue anymore. That day, Amir paid for the medicine. He sat beside Zain until his mother woke up, smiling weakly, her eyes full of gratitude she couldn't put into words. Over the next week, Amir visited daily. He brought food, helped with bills, and even spoke to a local charity to help arrange better care. But what changed him most wasn't the act of giving, it was the quiet dignity with which Zain's family received kindness. They never begged, never demanded. They only said thank you with eyes that spoke 1,000 stories. When Zain's mother began to recover, she asked to see Amir. He sat beside her bed, and she took his hand in hers. "You've done more than we could ever repay," she whispered. Amir shook his head. "Please, don't say that." She smiled faintly. "Then let me say this: you've reminded me that good people still exist." Her words stayed with him for days. Weeks later, when Zain returned to his street corner, things looked different. His flowers were fresher, his face brighter. "Business is good," he said proudly when Amir stopped by. "Mama is home now. She says I can go to evening school next month." Amir's heart swelled. He knelt down, looking at the small chalkboard propped against Zain's basket. In careful handwriting, it said, "Every flower sold helps my school." Amir laughed softly. "Smart idea, Zain." The boy grinned. "You taught me, sir. You said kindness keeps going." That night, Amir couldn't stop thinking about those words. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Amir was in a meeting when a delivery man walked in holding a small bouquet, fresh jasmine and white roses wrapped in brown paper. His colleagues exchanged amused looks. "Who's it from?" one asked, teasing. Amir opened the note attached to the bouquet. The handwriting was shaky but careful. "Dear sir. Thank you for buying all my flowers and helping my mother. She's better now, and I started school again. These flowers are my first gift to you, free of cost, but full of gratitude. Zain Blossom." Amir froze. His chest tightened, his vision blurred. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was quiet but firm. "Excuse me," he said, leaving the room. He stepped outside, standing by the office window, watching the city stretch endlessly before him. But for once, it didn't feel cold or distant. It felt alive with small stories like Zain's, with people trying, surviving, hoping. He looked at the bouquet again. It wasn't just flowers. It was proof that kindness grows roots. That evening, Amir went home and sat at his desk, unable to shake the feeling that something bigger was calling him. He began researching schools, charities, community programs. He wanted to do more, but he wasn't sure how. Then he remembered his mother's words, echoing softly in his mind. "Kindness is not a favor, Amir. It's a language the heart never forgets." He smiled through tears. The next day, he opened a small savings account, not for himself, but for Zain. Just enough to cover a year of schooling. When he told Zine, the boy's eyes filled instantly. But sir, that's too much. Amir shook his head. It's not charity, Zine. It's an investment. In your dream. Zine looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, one day, I'll make you proud. Amir smiled. You already have. That night, as he placed Zine's bouquet in a vase, Amir realized something extraordinary. He had set out to help one boy. But in doing so, he had healed something inside himself, a part that had forgotten how good it felt to care. And somewhere deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Because kindness, once given, never truly ends. It ripples quietly, endlessly changing lives far beyond what the giver can see. Years passed quietly, like pages turning in a book Amir didn't realize he was writing. The city changed, new buildings, new billboards, new faces rushing past one another. But in the quiet corners, some things remain the same. The smell of fresh naan in the morning. The sound of vendors calling out prices. And the memory of a small boy with flowers who had changed everything. Amir often wondered where Zine was. Their paths had drifted apart naturally, as life tends to do. Zine had started school full-time. His mother's health had improved. Amir had continued his work, but his life no longer felt hollow. Something inside him had awakened a desire to give, to build, to help. He began volunteering on weekends, sponsoring the education of other children like Zine. What started as one small act of kindness slowly grew into a mission that gave Amir's life meaning. Still, he never forgot the boy with the bright smile. One morning, nearly 10 years later, Amir received an unexpected letter in the mail. The envelope was cream-colored, his name written neatly across it. Inside was an invitation. Hope Blooms Foundation, 10th Anniversary Celebration. Guest of honor, Mr. Amir Rahman. His eyebrows lifted. Hope Blooms Foundation? The name sounded familiar somehow. At the bottom, a note in small handwriting caught his eye. Because one kind act started it all. Amir's heart skipped. He read the line again, slowly, as warmth spread through his chest. Zine. The evening of the event was calm and golden. Fairy lights glowed softly against the courtyard walls, and children's laughter filled the air. Volunteers moved about, arranging seats and banners that read, Educating hearts, changing futures. Amir stood near the back, feeling strangely nervous. He didn't like attention. He had never done any of this to be noticed. But tonight, it felt right to be there, like coming home to a place he didn't know he'd been missing. The host stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, she said warmly, we are honored to celebrate 10 years of Hope Blooms, an organization that has helped over 500 children return to school. And it all began with one boy, and one kind stranger. A murmur spread through the audience. Amir's breath caught. Then a young man stepped onto the stage. He was tall now, confident, wearing a simple white kurta. But those eyes full of warmth, full of hope, Amir recognized them instantly. Zine. For a moment, Amir couldn't move. He watched as the boy he once knew, the flower seller on the corner, took the microphone, smiling shyly at the crowd. When I was 9 years old, Zine began, I sold flowers on a dusty street corner. My mother was sick, and I had stopped going to school. Most people passed me by without a glance. He paused, his voice softening. But one man stopped. He bought all my flowers. He brought food when my mother was ill. He reminded me that kindness still exists and that even a small act can change a life. The audience was silent now, many leaning forward, listening closely. That one act, Zine continued, inspired me to start Hope Blooms, a place where children like me can find help, education, and hope. We built classrooms, provided meals, and changed hundreds of lives, all because someone chose to see me. He smiled, his voice trembling slightly. That man is here tonight. Every head turned as Zain looked directly at Amir. "Mr. Amir Rahman, please, will you join me?" Applause filled the air. Amir stood slowly, his throat tight, his eyes wet. As he walked toward the stage, Zain stepped forward, arms open. They hugged a long, wordless embrace that said everything neither could. When they pulled apart, Amir managed a shaky laugh. "You did all this, Zain." Zain smiled through tears. "We did, sir. You planted the seed. I just helped it grow." The audience rose to their feet in applause, many wiping their eyes. Amir looked out at the children in the front row, bright faces, full of life and promise, and felt his heart swell with a gratitude so deep it hurt. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, Zain and Amir sat together on the edge of the stage. The night air was cool, filled with the scent of jasmine and marigolds, the same flowers from all those years ago. "I kept one of your notes," Amir said quietly. "The one you sent with the flowers." Zain laughed softly. "And I kept something too," he said, pulling from his pocket an old, worn-out coin. "You gave me this as change that day. I told myself I wouldn't spend it until I made something of myself." He placed the coin in Amir's palm. "Now I think it belongs to you again." Amir closed his hand over it, eyes glistening. "No, Zain. Keep it. Let it remind you that hope never really runs out." Zain smiled, looking at the children playing nearby. "It doesn't, does it? It just passes on from one heart to another." The lights above them flickered softly, reflecting off the flowers on every table. For a long while, neither spoke. They didn't need to. Because both of them knew this wasn't the end of a story. It was the continuation of a promise made long ago, on a dusty street corner, between a weary man and a hopeful boy. Years later, people would often ask Zain what inspired him to start Hope Blooms. He would always smile and answer the same way. "One kind act changed my life. And that's all it takes, one." And somewhere in the audience, Amir would listen quietly, heart full, knowing that the world had come full circle.